Every day is a great day to talk about the history of the game, and today is no different. Former Milwaukee Doe Brenda Pitts is here to chat all about her journey to the University of Alabama, the WBL's first game, and her pioneering time in academia. Locked on Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and happy Friday. You are locked on to women's basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On NBA newsletter. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. If this is your first time listening to Locked On Women's Basketball, welcome. We at The Next have over 100 reported pieces every single month. We have a beat reporter on every single WNBA team, one on more than 15 different NCAA beats, so get that YouTube subscription up. And you can also support us by subscribing to The Next for $9 a month or $72 a year at thenexttubes.com. Today, we'll chat all about how Brenda Pitts got involved in basketball, her journey to the WBL, and her pioneering time in academia. Joining me today is former Milwaukee Doe and a pioneer in sport marketing, Brenda Pitts. Just to get started, when did you start playing basketball and why did you keep playing it?
Well, you know what? I used to tell people I was born with a basketball in my hand. I was raised on a small farm just outside of Huntsville, Alabama, and we were always playing sports. My mom and dad they both loved sports, and I had two brothers. We were all playing sports. And then as I got into sixth grade, that was when I joined the first school basketball team. So we had a sixth grade team. So from then on out, it was basketball 24/7.
How did you end up at the University of Alabama women's basketball team?
Funny story, as you know. A friend of mine who played basketball and was also in the marching band at her high school, a different high school where I was going to go to the University of Alabama and try out for University of Alabama $1 million marching band. And I was in band in high school too. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I'll go do that, because I didn't know that they had a basketball team. And technically in 1973, that was the year I graduated high school, they didn't have varsity sports for women at that time. So I went on to University of Alabama. I made it onto the marching band, the $1 million marching band. And one day in that very first fall semester, because I carried my basketball with me everywhere I went. I went to one of the gyms just by myself, and I was just shooting around, playing around. And these two women came in and they're like, what are you doing in here? And I thought I was in trouble. I'm like, well, I'm just shooting some hoops. They're like, what do you mean? Do you like to play basketball? And I was like, yeah, I love to play basketball. And they're like, have you played it before? And I'm like, yeah, since the sixth grade, pretty good, superstar all the way through. Oh, really? Well, where'd you play? They started asking me a whole lot of questions. And then they said, well, we have a team here. And I'm like, no, I didn't know that, because it's not a varsity sport. And they're like, well, it's not. It's kind of like a club sport. And we're the coaches, volunteer coaches at that. Nothing at that time. This was before Title IX went into effect. So they didn't have any money. They didn't have any full-time paid staff, coaches, everything. So I'm like, okay, sure. Let's go shoot some hoops. And so they had me come and try out for the team, and voila, I made it and became one of the starters. So that was 73-74, my freshman year. And then 74 is when Title IX was implemented. I go back for my sophomore year, and all of a sudden we had everything. We had full-time paid coaches. We had a women's athletic department. We had a women's athletic director and a full staff. We had our own gym. Well, we had one of the older gyms, but they gave it to us to be ours for basketball. We had several other sports. We had lots of other coaches. We had athletic trainers. We had the whole 9 yards. And I guess one of the other best things about it was we had money and we had scholarships. And so the basketball team got 5 scholarships that year, and I got one of them. So that was another first for me. You know, I could say I was one of the first women to get a sports scholarship at the University of Alabama. So that was how it all got started.
And then how did you see the change in investment in women's basketball from your freshman year when it wasn't even a varsity sport through your senior year?
Yeah, that was very different. My freshman year, no money, volunteer coaches. We drove ourselves to our games. We only had a few games. I don't remember how many, but we only had a few. We bought our own uniforms, our own shoes and everything. And so like I said, when we went to a game, we had to drive ourselves to the games. We carpooled. So we get 2 or 3 of the players in a car and drive to the game. So when I come back after my freshman year for my start of my sophomore year, when Title IX went into effect and the university had to share public money, you know, the taxes, then we had university vans to take us to the games. We still had to drive. So some of the coaches and some of the staff drove. We had the money for the scholarships. The university actually bought our uniforms and our shoes. They actually bought the basketballs that we used and played with. And so we even got food when we went on trips. So it was really nice to have that. Then my junior year, they stepped up even more money, bigger vans. We got to actually fly to some of the games. We flew in really small airplanes. These little airplanes would hold maybe 10 people. And I can remember I got to sit in the co-pilot's seat in one of these tiny planes. Seriously, the pilot is over here, when you're sitting in the co-pilot seat, when the pilot makes a move with I'll call it a steering wheel. I don't know what it's really called. The other one that's in front of you moves as well. So I'm like watching this go back and forth. That was pretty fun. Then my senior year, even more money, a bigger schedule, more tournaments. We were in the AIAW, which is the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, which was the women's, I'll say it this way, it was the women's NCAA. So the NCAA already existed. Women started our own. It was called the AIAW. So they were separate. So we had our own tournaments. We had our own AIAW national championship. So things were really, really, really getting started at that time. And my senior year, like I said, we had more money. We got more scholarships. We got to fly in a really big plane a couple times to some of our games. Once or twice, we got to fly in the actual university plane, giant Boeing, 747 plane that the men's team always got to use when they went somewhere to one of their games. So we got to do that. We started playing a lot of our games in the main basketball arena, which was called the Coliseum. Memorial Coliseum is the name of it there at University of Alabama, still there. We got to play a bunch of our games there. We mixed up times with the men's team, so we got to play a bunch of games before the men's game would play. We got to practice in there. So it was a big difference to go from my freshman year when we had nothing and just a club level sport to my sophomore, junior, and senior year. It was a varsity sport. Title IX had taken effect, and we actually got help. We got money. We got real coaches, real scholarships. I wouldn't say we had everything, but it was a difference of night and day the way it all started.
Coming up next, I talked to Pitts about her time in the WBL, including what it was like playing in the first WBL game. Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. When you graduated, there wasn't a league for you to go into. So you went into teaching and coaching. So when did you find out about the WBL and what were your reactions?
Well, the last 2 years I was in college, I had heard rumors about somebody out there somewhere wanted to start a professional league, and I was like, yeah, finally. I always told kids growing up, I'm going to be the first woman to play professional sports, even if I had to go and play for the Globetrotters. I'm like, I'm going to be the first one to do it. So I'd heard these rumors and I thought, well, I hope that it happens. I hope it takes place. I know it's going to be complicated. There's going to be a lot to it, a lot of people in it, a lot of money behind it, a lot of people taking risks to quit jobs and go and do this. But it never came to be during those couple of years. So I went on and graduated. I went and had a teaching job and a coaching job. And then that very next year in 78 is the first year that the WBL started. So as 77 went through and we get toward the end of 77 and the early part of 78, I was actually getting letters that had logos on it and things like that. I'm like, wow, this may actually come true. And I thought, well, if it does come true and I get recruited to play, I'm going to have to go play because, I bragged. I bragged like a kid when I was a kid, that I was going to be the first. And so sure enough, finally in that summer of 78, I got a letter saying, we want you to come. We want you to try out for one of the teams. They were going to start with 8 teams. And then eventually I got a letter from the Milwaukee Does. And they said, come to training camp. We want you here. We want you to try out. And so that was in late October. And I quit my job, my very first job. I quit it. I'm like, oh, I have to go do this. They're not going to have any money. I don't know how I'm going to pay for myself to live, but I got to go do it. So I talked to my mom and dad, and they're like, of course you got to go do it. This is like it's your legacy. You have to go and do this. It was always been your goal.
What did it mean to you to be able to continue your basketball career? And what was it like to play in that first ever WBL game?
Well, since it had been a year since my college days, I wasn't that rusty, maybe rustier than somebody who just graduated. But since I knew I was going to be going that summer and fall, I went out and started training myself to get ready. Once we were there and we were in training camp, it all sort of fell together. And then we found out, well, our team, the Milwaukee Does, was going to be in the very first game that was scheduled. And so that made it even more special. It's like another first to be a part of that no one can take away from you. So we were very excited as a team to be able to be in the very first game. We played the Chicago Hustle, and what the score was. I'm not going to say what the score was, but that was something really cool. And I remember the very first shot that was taken. Well, first of all, there were a lot of people there. There was over 7,000 in attendance at that game, which in today's world, it might not sound like much, but in 1978, this is the very, very, very first ever game. It's like we were hoping we would get a dozen people there, but tickets started selling like crazy. And so we had over 7,000 people there. So anyway, the first person Joni, who took the very first shot, they stopped the game, and it scared us all to death because as soon as she took the shot, lights went off. They stopped the game. I don't even remember if it went in or not. And they stopped the game and they ran over. Somebody got the ball and they went out to center court. They had all these officials come out there and they're like, this is history. We have to collect this ball. We're going to put it in the Smithsonian. We played and it was a really good game and it was exciting. And it was, the game was over. And the next day we were all like, wow, this is really going to happen. We're really a part of this. And the players our hearts were big and we were in it, because we loved the game, and we were in it to play. We wanted it to happen. We wanted it to be successful. We wanted it to take place. And we were very much a part of it. And, and if you think about that, at that period of time, to get a lot of people to quit their jobs and to take a chance it's a big risk to take a chance on something that's never existed before. There were several leagues after us. The WNBA came along, and it's been the most recent one. They didn't have anything to worry about, really. We had already taken all the arrows. I heard somebody say, if you're the first warrior down the path, you're going to be the one to take all the first arrows at that point. And we did. There were a lot of bumps and, speed bumps and along the way. But and I played that first year. I didn't go. Well, I went back for the second year and I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. But it was an amazing thing to have us all there. Everyone their heart was in it. They really wanted it to be successful and they really wanted it to last for a long, long time.
And then, you talk about deciding not to continue. You went back to teaching, got your master's degree, and decided to pivot into academia.
Yeah.
What was that like? What went into that decision? And can you just talk more about, as you continued to learn more about sport administration?
Yep. Okay. So I was always working on my master's degree in the summers because as a teacher, you get a little salary bump if you get extra degrees. And the second year of the WBL, when I went back to training camp and I decided, something in me said, I don't think you're having fun with this anymore. You did it. You're a pioneer. Now let's move on and get, do something that's in your next chapter. And when I was at school that summer, finishing the last few courses I needed for my master's degree, my professor advisor came to me and said, we're going to be starting this brand new degree thing, this whole new program that's called sports administration. He also would call it sport and fitness administration, and sometimes he would call it sport management. And I would say, well, that sounds interesting. What is that? And so he explained to me what was happening in the country, that there was an interest in having people get a specialized degree that focused on the business of sport. And I'm like, well, geez, I've been doing that my whole life. I could probably teach classes in that without having a book or anything. I was bragging a little bit like I tend to do. And he's like, well, look, you're here. Why don't you stay here? We'll start you in the doctoral program. We'll make this a part of that as a minor concentration. And you can help us put this together. Since you have that knowledge, you can help us put this together. For the next 3 years, that's what I did. I stayed there. I helped them put that together. And I think, as you know, my dissertation study was on the basketball that the WBL had created for them, which we'll talk about in a minute, I hope. And I was torn about, I really wanted to go back and coach at the high school level because my ultimate goal was to coach at the college level. And I had decided, one of my reasons for wanting to coach is to help young girls and young women realize their dreams. And then it dawned on me, well, if I'm a professor at a college, I can still do that. I can still help young women and young men as well, but I'll help them with their decisions that they're going to be making that's going to influence the entire industry, not just women's basketball, but the entire industry. And so I thought, okay, I like that. I like that idea. And I like the fact that I decided this was how I consoled myself. Instead of having a basketball team, I had students who I thought, okay, I'm gonna pretend I'm still a coach as a professor, and I'm gonna pretend my students are my players. And so that was sort of the way I went into it, and the way I sort of console myself for not going back into coaching. And I thought, okay, yeah, I can do this. And so I never looked back. And that's what I did. And that's what I did for 35 years.
Coming up next, I talk to Pitts about how her time in the WBL influenced her dissertation. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The listeners may not know this, but I got my master's degree in sport management, and I've written about Karen Logan and the ball that she made. Can you talk more about that dissertation and the importance of that women's basketball that Karen Logan designed?
Yes. When we got to training camp the very first year, that October 1978, and the first day after we had meetings and signed contracts and papers and did paperwork, then we finally got to get into a gym and start practicing. On the very first day, somebody walked in with these bags of basketballs, and they said, okay, and they started tossing them out. They're like, we're going to use these special basketballs. And we're like, what do you mean special? And I looked at one, and it had the WBL logo on it. And I'm like, okay, it's special. It's got the logo on it. Great. And then I started dribbling in it, and I was like, it was like a Super Bowl, So we started playing with that ball, and they told us, they said, look, well, this ball has been specially designed for the league. We're going to use it. Their idea was to use it as a marketing gimmick, because they thought, we'll use this to draw attention to the league, which is how they promoted it. One of the ways that they promoted it. For us, the players, we picked up that basketball. Now, mind you, it's only 1 inch smaller in circumference. It's only 1.5 ounces lighter in weight. So unless you are at an expert level like we were, high level athletes, you may or may not notice the difference, but we could. I remember the very first practice with those balls. I was a point guard. So one of my jobs was, I run the fast break, or I'm an outlet pass. I take the outlet pass. And if somebody's running for a fast break, I throw it to them down the court. I remember I took a pass from the center. I was on the side. I saw one of our players running. I threw the pass to her. I threw it over the backboard. Because what happens here is, what's called muscle memory. You are so used to, we're talking 15 years. I was used to one size and one weight of a basketball. I'm used to, I'll use the word heave. You saw women shooting like this, you were heaving the basketball. Or if you looked at a little kid today who takes a regular sized basketball, men's or women's, a little bitty 6-year-old, and they're trying to shoot to a goal, they're having to, heave it up there. Well, we didn't have to do that anymore. We could shoot with a little light wrist snap, just like a regular jump shot. We could make passes without having to use so much muscle. We could dribble like crazy between our legs and, spin the ball and make passes like mad behind the back and that kind of thing. And that basketball, after the first couple days, we got used to it. And that basketball made a huge difference in the way that we played the game. And now, some people said, oh, well, it's smaller, so of course you made more baskets. No, that doesn't matter. You still have to have good aim. You still have to have a good shot. Then the other thing I learned after that was, or going into that season, was the person who had the idea was Karen Logan. And I already knew who she was because she was already a well-known player. She was part of what was called the Battle of the Sexes in sports. So that made it a little more special to know that somebody who played the game came up with this idea. Later on, when I was in school working for my doctorate, and my advisors, well, I'll just admit this on camera, I ran off from the WBL with one of the basketballs. I stole it. I borrowed it. And so my advisor, Joe Smith, found out about it. And it was his idea to do a comparison study to compare skills test scores using that basketball compared to the men's basketball. And so that's what I did. I did a study. I used 4 high school girls basketball teams. I used 4 college level teams, ran skills test studies with them. And the way I had to work it was, now these are people who've been playing basketball for a long time. I'm thinking my study is not going to work because they're so used to the regular basketball, they won't be able to perform well with the smaller basketball. But you know what? They did. And on every one, I used 8 skills tests. They performed better on every one of them, the high school players and the college players. And so the study was published. My dissertation was published. And within that next year, I got a phone call from the WBCA, which is the Women's Basketball Coaches Association, they had heard about the study. They were asking about the study, asking me questions. They wanted to know, what did I think? They knew that I played. What did I think about it as a player? And what did I think about it as a researcher? And I gave them as much information as I could. Of course, I sent them the copy of the study. And within a couple of years, next thing you know, they adopted the new women's basketball for college level play. Later on, the schools came on board and they started adopting it, which I always thought was kind of backwards. I wanted the schools to adopt it first. And then 3 years later, to give those players time to get used to it. Then 3 years later for the colleges to adopt it so they would have time. But it went backwards, but that's okay, because now everybody has that basketball. It's everywhere, all around the world. And it all started in 1978 with Karen Logan and her idea to argue that girls and women should have a piece of equipment that's scientifically designed to fit their hands and their upper body strength level. That's how it all started.
What impact do you hope you had either in the WBL or in your academic career?
Well, first WBL, since that came first, those of us who went for that first year, some played only a month, some played a year, some played 2 or 3 years. But my point is with that is we got to start it. We started it all, so we are the pioneers for that very first women's professional basketball league back in 1978, which is, I almost hate to say this because it's going to make me feel more older than 29 years old. But you know what? In 4 years, in 2028, that's going to be the 50th anniversary of the WBL. I can't believe it. But so the importance of that is that we were the first. There were those of us who were willing to take that risk and take that chance, quit our jobs to go and take a chance on something starting up like that. I think that it was successful which means to me, with my marketing brain, that it was the community, the citizenship was ready for women's professional basketball because it was very successful. Its first year and every year after that. So in academia, I always thought, okay, I need to do, well, when I first started, there were no textbooks. So that was in 1984. I had my first job at University of Louisville. And we didn't have any textbooks. There were no courses. I went there. There were no courses. There were no textbooks in our field. And so those of us who were there, it's another one of those, let's be the pioneers. If it doesn't exist, let's start it. Let's get it going. And so I was used to giving a lot of handouts to the students in class. And at the end of the semester one year, one student said, Dr. Pitts, you gave us over 300 pages of handouts because there's no textbook. I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's why I had to give you so many handouts. And they went, well, why don't you just make it into a book? I was like, could have had a VA. It was one of those moments. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I never thought about that because I don't think of myself as, a scholar or a book nerd or anything like that. I thought I got to use handouts because there's no textbook, because I was teaching the courses in sport marketing. And I would tell the students, go to the library, check out any book on marketing, basic marketing, principles of marketing. That's what we're going to cover. I'm going to change a lot of it because it's going to be adapted and modified to one industry only. Just happens to be the largest one in the world. That's the sport business industry. So go get you a book. We'll use that as a foundation, and I'm going to give you a lot of handouts, which is what I was doing. So yeah, another first. One of my sport marketing books was also one of the first sport marketing books. Another first book out there. 94, I think, was when the first one was published. And then I was part of a committee to start what was called the Sport Management Library, which was a whole bunch of textbooks on all of the topics that are in sport business management. You know what they are: sport finance, sport governance, ethics in sport management, everything in sport management. So we helped get that going too. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me. I had a great time chatting with you as always. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On NBA newsletter. And make sure to tune in tomorrow to hear from our WNBA draft crew.